All right, and this is the Stella Culinary School Podcast, found online at stellaculinary.com. My name is Jacob Burton. Thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. Got a couple of things. We'll see how far we get into all of this stuff, but we're going to talk about some knives and which knives you should use and choose and how I go about picking up my knives, and my take might surprise you. Also, we're going to try and get to some grills and offset smokers. It is going to be the smoking season here really rapidly. It's turning into spring here in beautiful northern Nevada, which is in the northern hemisphere. For all my friends in Australia, you guys are getting ready to, or the southern hemisphere in general, you guys are getting ready to hunker down for winter here. But it's always a good time to smoke and grill. But I know when it goes from cold to warm, I start feeling the itch to get outside and to cook and to enjoy the weather. And then also we're going to talk about how to get paid the maximum amount of money if you are a professional cook or restaurant person, how to actually negotiate your wages. All right. And a special shout out to Daniel, who just got promoted to sous chef in our group. That's always exciting. Congratulations on the sous chef position, Daniel. And thanks everyone for joining us. So I actually had a voicemail come in. So if you go to the stellaculinary.com homepage and you click on the contact button, you can actually record a voicemail. You can do it from your phone or from your computer. And this one comes in from Andy. She's going to kick us off for the day. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Jacob. It's Andy Ellis. And son David and I have 3 questions for the upcoming Friday class. One is the knife question.
Oh, yeah. Carbon steel or stainless steel preference in terms of...
Carbon steel or stainless steel preference for kitchen knives. That's question 1.
All right, so that'll kick us off in our knife discussion. And I've been getting a lot of questions on this recently along those lines of what should I be buying, carbon steel versus stainless steel, brand names, that sort of thing. Now, if you have listened to all my past podcasts, which there's quite a bit now. This is now episode 75. But the very first podcast episode that we had was all about culinary knife skills, which was important, right? Because the Stella Culinary School Podcast is all about kind of walking you through my version of culinary school. It takes what I learned in culinary school and in the professional kitchen and what it took to become a professional chef and merges them into what I believe is the most efficient way possible for you to learn how to cook. And you always want to start with knife skills. Last episode, we talked about knife skills quite a bit and the importance of knife skills, whether you're a home cook or professional cook. And one of the most important features of knife skills is having a sharp knife. It's really difficult to have good knife skills without a sharp knife. But outside of that, your technique will pretty much take care of you. So if you ever want to be a really successful knife salesperson that you see at those home shows or at the state fair or whatever, I would recommend just drilling your knife skills, drill. You can start by taking part in our Greek salad challenge, which we'll talk about more here in a little bit. I'll give you guys an update on that. But it doesn't matter really the knife or the make or the model, as long as it's sharp, you're going to have a knife that's going to get the job done. Now, beyond that, it's all about personal preference. So let's kind of break down the personal preference a little bit. And number one, carbon steel is interesting material, but it's a pain in the butt, right? I mean, God forbid, it's kind of like your cast iron pans of the world, right, of the knife world. I mean, God forbid you leave a drop of water on it, and I'm melting. It starts to rust and degrade the blade. And it's just kind of finicky. And here's the thing is, earlier on in my career, I had a lot more time to deal with finicky items. And you kind of wear it like a badge of pride. It's like, oh, you got to, or a badge of honor, right? Oh, you got to do this with this knife. You got to do that with this knife. If not, it'll crumble into dust, right? But it's a, $500 knife. So, I must be good at what I'm doing. And that's what I see a lot of people doing with their knives, especially early on in the professional kitchens, is they measure their ego with their brand. Now, when I first came out with episode 1 of the Stella Culinary School Podcast, I recommended one of the brands that I used early on, I still use to this day because the knife has lasted me over a decade, which is shun. Now, this is before you saw Bobby Flay and Kat Cora and all those other Food Network chefs and, Alton Brown, right? They all got nice endorsement deals from shun, while yours truly, Jacob Burton, the early adopter, got the shun from shun. And, that's okay. But so now they became popular brands and popular knives. And they also became very popular to hate on. It's basically, if you're going to spend that much money on a knife, you're better off doing this or getting that and whatever. So then it became uncool to have a shun knife. But really what's uncool is giving a shit about what kind of brand of knife somebody else uses, right? Again, either they can get the job done or they can't. And it's really a sign of just lack of confidence in a kitchen when you're like, you use a Wusthof? Well, look at my custom made blade that I have here. It's it's from this guy who does it like this and like that. It's like, whatever. If the knife feels good in your hand, then that's what you should use. Okay. Now we'll talk about where you want to make your investment here in a second. Now, if you are a professional chef, a professional cook, right, you use your knives a lot. Okay. So you want to use something that makes you happy. So if a $400 or a $500 custom chef's knife makes you happy and it's your daily driver, then by all means, you should go out and splurge on it, assuming you're not going to miss this month's rent, right? Because you're going to be using it every day. It's going to be getting its use, all right? Now, for me, what makes me happy is something that doesn't take a whole lot of time away from my day. I'm a busy guy, and I don't want a finicky knife that I have to constantly sharpen and constantly baby. So because of that, I have a whole sort of assortment of knives, but I really stick to just a couple knives in general. So I still use my Tennant Shun that I bought over a decade ago because it still works, and I'm cheap. And why spend a few $100 on other chef's knives? Not to mention, not to brag or anything, but I got people all the time wanting to send me chef's knives. I'm like, man, I've seen one, I've seen them all, really. Is it sharp? Can I hold it in my hand and cut shit with it? Cool. I don't need another chef knife filling my drawer. So I use my Tennant Shun. You guys see me a lot using the Chinese cleaver, the vegetable cleaver, which I like, and those are cheap. You can get those for like $20. If you have like a local Chinatown, right? I got mine in San Francisco. $20. Again, I got it like 10 years ago. The wood handle's a little bit wobbly, but what I like is it's a thin blade. It's softer metal, which means it doesn't hold its edge quite as long, but it's really, really easy to sharpen, right? Which is important. And then I have my 6.5-inch utility knife, which is probably my favorite knife ever. That's the only knife that I bought two of, right? So I have the Shun 6.5-inch utility knife, and I love that thing. The one that I bought over 10 years ago has a really thin blade that I have kind of ground down over time. And I use that sucker for everything, right? I use it for cutting, small grape tomatoes. I use it for butchery, right? It has a little bit of flex to the blade, so it's a great boning knife. And I love it. I use that thing for everything. And when I lost one temporarily, when I lost my first one temporarily, I bought a second one, right? So now I have two, and I kind of switch back and forth, and I might even buy a third one, right? Because they work. I love them. It's just it's a great solid knife. So for me, besides the occasional use of a serrated knife for cutting bread, right? And by the way, if you cut tomatoes with a bread knife, shame on you. Okay, what you're admitting is that you have a really, really dull knife, so you're gonna just kind of crush through the tomatoes with a serrated edge, right? Because you can't keep your knife sharp. So shame on you for that. But besides the occasional use of a bread knife, which, by the way, for bread knives, you can sharpen them, but they're kind of a pain to sharpen. You can only sharpen one side when it does come time to sharpen them. And usually you only can sharpen them on a stone about 3 to 4 times before you grind them down too far. So for the pros out there, I just order my bread knives from US Foods, which is kind of, it's our, you have Cisco and US Foods. We use US Foods because it's just part of a contract that we have. But they're just your normal dry goods supplier. And I buy, I think they're like $15, $18. I buy like 10 of them, right? And when we burn through them, I buy 10 more. And that's just, I have house knives that are serrated knives that we use for slicing our bread. So it doesn't really make sense to me to buy a really, really expensive bread knife only because of the longevity. Now at home, the amount of bread that you slice will be probably 1/100th of the amount of bread that we slice in a professional kitchen. So if you have, look at any knife maker, they're going to have a high-end bread knife that's going to cost you $100, $150, maybe $200, and it looks beautiful, on your knife rack, and it feels good in your hand. So if it makes you happy and it's not causing you to miss your mortgage payment, then go ahead and buy it. But my approach for a professional kitchen is I just buy knives, the bread knives that we can use as house knives, and we go ahead and sharpen those. Now, what you want to do, right, is again get a chef's knife that is low maintenance, right? And again, it's all subjective. That's what you have to understand, right? It's all subjective. Get something that makes you happy, that you're comfortable using with on a daily basis. So if you fall in love with a carbon steel blade and you understand the care that you need to give it to keep it, from rusting and from, getting dull on you, and you really love that knife, then by all means get it, and more power to you. But when you're shopping for a knife, what you should do is, go to a kitchen store that actually allows you to hold a chef's knife and hold it in your hand. And you'll know it's kind of like, picking out a puppy or buying a car, right? Like, you don't ever know exactly what you're looking for until you see it. And it's the same thing with a knife. Just pick it up. It'll either feel right or it won't. And price has nothing to do with overall quality. In fact, some of my favorite knives are lower end knives that just off brands that you wouldn't even know, mainly because they're easier to maintain and to sharpen, which we'll get into here in a second. A really good sort of lower end, not lower end, but like lower price range knife is a Mundal. And Mundals, they're German-style knives. They're made in Brazil. You can get a solid chef's knife from them on Amazon for, I think, like $60. And they're worth it, and they're a great entry-level knife. Now, what never ceases to amaze me is people who go out and spend hundreds of dollars on chef's knives, and what do they forget? It's like buying a $10,000 stove, but you have no hood above it. Come on, shout it out. I know you know the answer. That's right. That's right. A good sharpening stone or a good sharpening system. Now, again, I am a fan of things that do not take up my time, right? The most important, the most valuable asset that I have in my life, especially as a professional chef, is my time. So I'm always looking to maximize my efficiencies. So early on in my career, I bought the water stones that you would use to sharpen any number of knives, and you see chefs using them. I also had oil stones, the tri-stones. I have some videos on how to use a oil stone and a water stone. And the thing is sharpening knives by hand, it gets very, very time consuming to do it right. And no matter how good you think you are, it's really, really hard to maintain that angle unless you practice a lot or you have an angle guide. But free hand sharpening knives is extremely difficult to do. And you have a lot of people, especially in professional kitchens, that fool themselves into thinking that they can actually freehand sharpen their knives, but then you see them sharpen their knives on their sharpening stone every other day. You know why they do it every other day? Not because they use their knife so much. It's because the blade that they put on it by going back and forth like this constantly is inconsistent. They don't have a consistent angle on there. And because of that, their knife gets dull much faster. So you can take any knife, right? You can go outside, you can rub it on some concrete, and it'll put an edge on it, an inconsistent edge, albeit, right? But you can rub it on some concrete, and it'll give you a sharper edge than you have when it's a dull knife, and you can slice some tomatoes with it and trick yourself into thinking that it's sharp, but it's not. right? You have an inconsistent edge that's just going to break down over time. All right. So what I recommend people do is they invest in a really good knife sharpening system. So here's what I use. It's called the Tormek T4, and it just looks like your traditional kind of sharpening wheel. I think the entry level it's about $400 on Amazon. Oh my God, Jacob, $400. Yeah. How much have you, look in your drawer, add up your knives. How much have you spent on your knives? Now, how many of those knives are actually razor sharp? How many? Don't lie to yourself. How many? Okay. Because I'll take 3 super sharp knives and a Tormek over just about anything. Now, what I like about the Tormek, right? So it's a water-based stone. Yeah, and there's also ones like, so you have like the Edge Pro and you have like Wasabi that I've seen, right? So anything, so what you want to look for here is you want to look for something that has a angle guide. So you can see right here, this has a bar that allows you to set the angle on your knife and to do a consistent angle. Okay, so again, just remember, it's all about a consistent sharpening angle. So whatever sharpening system you get, you need to have a consistent angle. All right, so this is worth, for me, every dollar. And what's nice, because it's an actual rotating stone, what I really like about it is the fact that it sharpens my knives very quickly. Okay, I have a little bit of, I don't have a whole lot of free time in my day. All right, so I would need to always maximize the efficiency. So I will take a cheap knife, a couple of cheap knives, and a Tormek T4 over any high-end knife you give me, because guess what? Within 2 weeks, right, that high-end knife is dull. You may as well give me a butter knife, right? So if you want to spend money on your knife system, go out first. So write yourself a budget, okay? Write yourself a budget. If you only have a few $100s, you want to pick out your knife sharpening system first, okay? Knife sharpening system first, right? And that is a good steel. Now, the steel that I recommend is also expensive, but it's worth every penny. I've been using it for years. It's the F-Dick Multi-Cut. All right, the F-Dick Multi-Cut steel. Maybe that's not the best thing to do on live, is to search for an F-Dick Multi-Cut. However, just go ahead and search for F-Dick Multi-Cut, and it's a great sharpening steel or honing steel, and that's what I use. And so you have a good honing steel, you have a good sharpening stone system, and then go out and buy your chef's knife, okay? Then go out and buy your utility knife. And you want to build your kit over time, okay? You want to build it over time. So, yeah, I see, people are talking about the Tormek is, the gold standard, and it's kind of pricey. But yeah, you have other systems out there now. Now, Dave says, regarding the Tormek, I've been concerned about the amount of metal removed from the knife. That's, in my experience, that hasn't been an issue. People seem to be concerned about metal being removed from their knives mechanically with those mechanical wheels. And you know what removes a lot of metal is like that insistent scraping back and forth. You ever see like those sushi chefs that sharpen their knives like every single day, and they're cutting stuff with like toothpicks, right? Is that constant scraping back and forth. So if you run the Tormek nicely, and here's the thing too, is staying consistent on keeping up with your edge. So the first time, if you don't have good edge maintenance, the first time you sharpen your knife and it's really dull, chances are you're gonna have to reset the edge with the Tormek or with that whatever sharpening system that you use. So you use a rougher grit stone to first reset the edge, and then you use a finer stone to polish that edge. So for me, my approach is, so you use the normal Tormek stone, which has like a double-sided, which looks like a flattening stone, right? One's rough and one's smooth, and you run the rough side on the actual sharpening wheel, okay? And that gives it a rougher grit, and you can use that to reset the edge. And then you polish your edge, but as long as you're not in between sharpenings, damaging that edge, it's usually like 5 to 10 swipes on both sides, and you're good to go. Now, the thing that's also really nice about a Tormek or any sort of knife sharpening system like that, but specifically something that's mechanically driven, is if you have a double bevel knife, which a lot of knives are, shuns are one of them, right? So the double bevel, just think of like a 2V. So you have so you have your knife blade that comes down straight at 90-degree angles on each side. That's the majority of your blade, right? And then you have your first sort of V in at a bit of a broader angle, right? And then you have a second more narrow V in at a second angle, right? And that second angle where that meets, that's going to be the edge of your blade. So that's a double bevel. And what that does is it reinforces your actual knife's edge and makes it more sturdy. But over time, over years of doling and sharpening, you wear down that first bevel, and you get this blunted edge that you can't actually resharpen because it's too broad. So then what you need to do is you need to decide, well, am I going to turn this double bevel knife into a single bevel and reset it like that, or am I going to do it? Am I going to actually reset the double bevel? And either way, what that requires is you taking the knife down and you sharpen it at a bit of a broader angle first to reset that bevel, and then you resharpen it again at a more narrow angle, right? And it's extremely time consuming to do by hand. And then, if something like, I know Shun, for example, they allow you to send back your knives to have them resharpened and re-edged. They took that away for a while and then they brought it back. I don't know if they're still doing it. But again, in a professional environment, time is money. I can't box up my knives and ship them away and wait for 3 weeks for them to return. I mean, at this point, I probably could because I got some other knives laying around that I could use. But it's just the convenience of it, right? The fact that it's Friday afternoon, I'm prepping for dinner service, and my knife is kind of dull. I'm running it on the sharpening steel or the honing rod, and the edge isn't really coming back. I can just run downstairs real quick, throw it on the wheel, and bring it back within a couple of minutes. And also, one of the reasons why I bought this too is because in our local market, there used to be a really good mobile knife sharpener, but he's since gone out of business. And so if you have a good local knife sharpener, they usually cost you $3 to $5 a blade. So you start doing the math, right? It's gonna take you a while to recoup your investment on something like a Tormek or other knife sharpening system. But you do have the added convenience, and it is kind of badass to have your own sharpening wheel. But because we don't have a good local knife sharpener, I bought this for myself, but also for my cooks, right? So all my cooks, when their knives get dull, I run downstairs, I throw a nice edge on them because, if I'm going to demand that they have, good knife cuts, then I'm going to help them have good sharp knives, right? And it's hard for them to, I understand the struggle of keeping that knife edge sharp with a with a traditional hand stone. So, I take it downstairs and I sharpen it for them because I'm kind of a sweetheart like that. I play tough. I pretend like I'm tough, but really when it comes down to it, I got a soft spot for my cooks. So I hope that answered your guys' questions, right? Let's see. Diana asked, which chef's knife is best for people with mild wrist issues that are petite? I like, so for me, MAC, MAC, they make good knives, but one thing that I don't like about them personally is their handle's a little bit too thin, and the knife is actually a little bit too light for my liking. I like a little bit of a heavier knife, and a little bit of a broader handle, because I kind of have like ape hands, right? So what happens is when you have a larger hand, if you have like a thinner handle coming across your palm, it kind of, even though the focus of your grip is that professional pinch grip, so it's on the blade section. What happens is the thinness of the handle causes you to roll your hand more, which makes your grip tighter, creates a pressure point, at least for me. So across that palm, it'll create a pressure point, and then over time, if I'm cutting something for an hour and a half, my palm starts to cramp up. So I actually prefer a broader handle. which is kind of why I like, and a heavier knife, which is why I have the affinity for the Shuns, because they're both a little bit heavier than normal, and they also have that broader, wider sort of like round octagon sort of angle or handle. So for you, Diana, I would recommend checking out Max. But again, you never really know what you like. So I know it's kind of tough right now. In the COVID era, there's, some people don't have access to actual stores that you can walk into. But if and when you do, walk into your local kitchen store or a store with the best knife selection that you can find and hold it in your hand, because you're going to know, right? Like I promise, you think like you don't really trust yourself to pick out a knife, but I guarantee you that you'll go through, you'll grab some knives, you'll kind of hold them in your hand, and you'll pick one up and be like, that's the one. It feels great in my hand. Like, this is the knife that I want in my hand when I'm cutting. So as far as what size chef knife do I recommend a 10-inch because when you're using a 10-inch chef's knife, you want to be able to use the full blade. So when slicing something, you want to be able to draw your knife through it and really use that edge. It's considered bad technique to saw back and forth in short motions, which you're kind of forced to do with a shorter knife, like a 8-inch chef's knife, right? So you want to be able to draw your knife through. However, a 12-inch chef's knife is a sort of an inconvenient size. You start running into space issues, especially in professional kitchens, with the width and the depth of your cutting boards, especially the line cutting boards. But some people like a 12-inch knife, right? But I wouldn't go shorter than a 10-inch. And then also the same thing with a mincing motion. So when you're holding you're pressing down with your guide hand, you're pressing down on the tip of your knife and making that mincing motion, right? You're going to have more range of motion and more fluidity of movement with a 10-inch chef's knife than you would a shorter knife. All right, so my recommended starter kit is a 10-inch chef's knife and a 6.5-inch utility knife, and then throw in a cheap bread knife while you're at it. And then kind of build your kit around there. Now, now I want to be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having 20, 30, 40, 100 knives, right? Like, if that's your thing, if you got a bit of a knife fetish and you like collecting them and you enjoy, using this knife for that and that knife for that, right? That's what it's all about. I mean, we really want to maximize your cooking enjoyment, right? Because that's just if you enjoy it, you're going to be better at it. However, it's silly to go out and spend a ton of money on knives as a status symbol when you're just it's gonna be dull in a couple of months anyways if you're using it a lot. And you got some kid making $12 an hour with a $30 banger who knows how to sharpen his edge, and he's whipping through prep faster than you could ever imagine because that's what he does on a daily basis, right? And he's doing it with a $30 chef's knife because it has a sharp edge and he has good technique. All right. Okay, so I think that kind of puts a pin in that. So that's what I recommend. That's my updated recommendations for your chef's knife. So again, just to recap, 10-inch chef's knife, 6.5-inch utility knife, and then spend as much money as you can comfortably afford on your sharpening system after you research a local sharpener, right? If you can find a good local sharpener, that's convenient for you, right? But again, you want to remove that friction from having a sharp edge, right? So the more inconvenient it is for you, everyone, when they buy their knives and the company offers hey, ship them back to us and we'll put a new edge on it, sounds great at the time. Like, oh, that's great. Wait, you'll do that for free? Really? Like, you'll put a new edge on my knife for free? Like, whenever I want, I can just ship them back to you? I'm like, yeah, of course, sucker. Like, how many people really do that? Like, I've never shipped my knives back, right? And everyone always wants to talk about how people will the knife company will maintain your blade. All you got to do is ship them back, and they'll ship them back to you, right? But there's so much friction there. That's the reason why they offer it for free. If everyone did that, who bought knives from them and shipped them back every couple of months as their knives got dull, right? There's no way that they could legitimately offer them for free. It's like those $10 gyms, right? So the reason why they can afford to only charge people $10 for a gym membership is because 80% of the people aren't showing up, right? But they're dinging their card for $10 every single month. Same thing with your knives, right? You're not sending your knives back. Why? Because it's inconvenient. There's too much friction there. So be honest with yourself and set something in place. If you're serious about your knives and you're serious about your knife skills, you have to have sharp knives. So set something in place now that you know that you can adhere to, whether it's taking your knives to the local knife sharpener every few months, whether it's buying some sort of honing system, whatever it is, right? And put that in place now because you will thank yourself later on. Okay, so now let's get into, after a sip of coffee here, grilling season for us here in on the West Coast of the United States is right around the corner. Now, if you're a true hardcore fan, it's year round. You'll do it in the snow. And for all my pedantic Pete's out there, I like to use grilling and barbecuing and smoking kind of interchangeably. Why? Because we're having a conversation. All right? We're not writing a freaking dictionary. Okay? So don't let it throw you off when I talk about grilling season and smokers and all that stuff interchangeably. It's all shit you use to cook outside with. Okay? And we're going to break it down. Which one do you need? And it all kind of depends on your personal preference. So first, let's kind of break out the two categories because understanding the two different categories are important. Okay, so when you're cooking outside, you have basically two options. You have your low and slow, and you got your high and fast. Okay, so for those of you who have paid attention to our technique videos in the past, as far as when we talk about cooking techniques, right, and how you choose a proper cooking technique. And so if you go to stellaculinary.com/CT, there's actually a video on how you choose a proper cooking technique. It's all based on the product that you're cooking. So a tough cut of meat that has a lot of connective tissue like collagen or whatnot. Those are your shanks, your short ribs, your briskets, things like that, ribs, right? They're all going to be tough until you break down that connective tissue, that collagen, right, which is a triple helix of gelatin. And so to do that, you need to apply slow, low heat. It slowly breaks that down over time, and it makes it nice and tender, okay? So for outside cooking, that's your smoking. You're smoking at low and slow. Normal temperatures range from as low as you can do cold smoking, right? But in this case, the sweet spot seems to be 225 to 250, depending on who you ask, and then people adjust up and down from there based on personal preference or what works for them. Right? Let's not get too bogged down in the weeds on that. But basically, smoking is your low and slow. That's what you use for your tough cuts of meat traditionally. Now, however, do we, in the home kitchen or in the kitchen in general, do we use low and slow exclusively for our tough cuts? No, we can also use it for reverse searing, right? So you've seen where I do the hamburgers reverse seared in the oven, where you have the big, thick 8-ounce patties, and you cook them to mid-rare at 225, and then you pull them out, let them rest, and then you sear them. We've talked about in the past with sous vide, that whole process where you're slowly bringing your items up to temperature, and then you're searing them to finish, but you let the exterior cool down before you sear, so that way you're not up-temping. All right, so all of those same approaches apply when you're cooking low and slow outside at 225, okay? Then you have your hot and fast. Your hot and fast is for your tender cuts of meat that don't have a whole lot of connective tissue to break down during the cooking process, okay? When I was growing up, my dear old dad, he used to love cooking those big beef ribs, not like the dino ribs, right? Not like the nice ones, right? But I kind of like the cheap beef ribs that you get on sale at the supermarket. He would put those on the grill on the good old Weber kettle, and he would just grill the shit out of those things, right? And brush them with barbecue sauce, and they'd be all gristly and chewy, and you'd bite into them, and you're like, it's like chewing gum. It's like, they're great, Dad, and I didn't know any better. Actually, I did like them, right? Because it's like, there's something about like that, the smoked meat flavor, right? That just, it's kind of hard to mess up. Especially if you don't know any better. I'd never been exposed to actual good barbecue. Now, later on, what I learned is throwing those big chunks of ribs, which is a tough cut of meat, directly on a hot Weber grill and charring them to shit. The reason why they're all chewy is because we didn't cook them low and slow until they were tender, right? So your tender cuts of meat, though, you can do a quick sear with chicken breasts or steaks or tri-tips. All of these things work really good for high, hot, and fast heat. Okay, and so this is going to be kind of like the distinguishing point of as far as what sort of equipment you want and what you want to choose. Okay, so if you're just getting into it and you want to kind of explore the world of barbecue, my recommendation, what I love, is a good old-fashioned Weber kettle. Right? It's a really great entry-level cooker that offers a lot of versatility that you can do everything on, just not perfect. Okay, and we'll get into the reasons why here in a second. But what's really great about the Weber kettle is it'll teach you fire control. And you start watching tutorials on, the minion method, where you light just a few coals and you put them on top at a slow burn. It'll teach you about your dampeners on the bottom and on the top, and airflow. It'll teach you about how to do a snake burn, right? All these things that are necessary. And I could, I've done, 12-hour smokes for like a pork shoulder on my Weber kettle. And I also fire it up and, sear chicken thighs on it or sear steaks on it. Okay. And there's all sorts of really great third-party components that you can add to it. God, what's the one? Nah, I'm spacing right now. But basically, it's a half-moon shaped piece of metal that you move to one side, and you can load your coals on there, and it really concentrates and focuses the searing area, so it gives you 2 zones. You can also do that with some bricks, so I'll do like a line of bricks down the center or on the side, and it really teaches you how to do zone cooking. And it's what I have in my backyard, and it's what I use the most frequently. Okay. Now, the problem with a Weber kettle, and kind of along those same lines, so, I mean, while we're talking about kettles, you also have sort of their big brothers, which are the Komodo cookers, right? And those are your ceramic cookers. They look like eggs. In fact, one of the most popular brands is called the Big Green Egg. And what's nice about those is they have the ceramic tiles, which insulate them, and it's really easy to hold and maintain a temperature. But it's kind of like a cast iron pan, right? Once you overshoot your temperature, you got a lot of thermal mass loaded in there to keep the temperature nice and even. So it's really hard to bring that temperature back down efficiently. So they're not super responsive. But once you get them dialed, you can hold your Komodo cooker, your Big Green Egg, at 225, 250 for hours and hours and hours with very minimal attention, okay? They also get really, really hot, so they're great for searing and great for pizzas. Now, the problem with, and I'm about ready to piss some people off here, okay? But it's going to be true, right? And the reason why it'll make you angry is because you will know that it's true when I say it, right? And you're going to not want it to be true. You're going to not want it to be true, right? But then when you calm down, you're going to think, God, damn it. Yeah, he's right. He's right. When you smoke in the same chamber that you cook, you will never have the cleanest and purest smoke flavor, no matter how hard you try. Okay? So that includes my beloved Weber kettle. That includes all of your Komodo cookers, like your Komodo Joe and the Big Green Egg, which I love, right? But when you, slow and sear, thank you. Slow and sear is the thing that you, that allows you to separate the coals. I appreciate that there, Dave. But you will never have the cleanest smoke flavor. And that's because wood needs to burn at least 400 degrees Fahrenheit, where it's actually on fire, right, or red hot, to have that nice, clean, burning flavor, all right? Now, when you hold it in a 225-degree chamber, you're not really burning that wood cleanly, no matter how dry it is. You're smoldering it, right? Now, I can take a pork butt, and I can give it a good rub, and I can smoke it on my Weber kettle, and hold my Weber kettle at 225, 250 for 12 hours. I can pull it, I can serve it on some home-baked buns, and it will flip your lid. It is delicious. You will absolutely love it. Okay, and it'll have a good, nice smoke flavor, all right? But if you've tasted the purity of a smoked item from an offset cooker, right, and you have a good palate, you'll be able to pick it out, okay? And we're talking like that final 10 to 15%. Now, most people, no matter what kind of cooker they have a hard time just controlling their temp and getting that smoke flavor and executing, right? So it's like anything else. I mean, you can have a $10,000 stove, but that doesn't mean you can pan roast a steak to save your life, okay? So you can take a nice Weber kettle and you can smoke a very acceptable, a very delicious rack of ribs or pork butt on it, and I do it all the time, okay? However, you're just not going to get the best flavor. Now, that's where your offset smokers come in, okay? Your offset smokers are basically, they have a chamber, right, off to the side that is your burn box that you actually burn your wood in, right? And then that smoke then transfers into the secondary chamber that's next to it, and that's what actually cooks your food. And how you control your airflow, right? So if you've learned anything about controlling your airflow on your Weber kettle, the same thing is kind of true with your offset smokers, just a little bit different, right? But you have your fire side and you have your top dampener side. And in general, ideally you want to have your top dampener always fully open to allow that smoke to escape, right? Nice and clean. And then you're controlling your burn side. And there's all sorts of, I mean, we could talk hours and hours and hours about just how you control your burn in an offset smoker, right? But just suffice to say, it takes practice and it takes time. And when you get that right, when you can hold a nice steady 225 to 250 for hours and hours and hours in offset smoker, that's where you get your real pro level barbecue, where you get just that beautiful, clean smoke flavor that just is so pure. And that's the only way to really explain it. And until you've had a comparison side by side, you think that the smoke flavor that you're getting from your Komodo or from your Weber is really pure, but there's always that back hint of creosote, ashiness, right? Just ever so slightly, not offensive, right? But then you'll taste your buddy's ribs who really has, her offset smoker down, and he's like, damn it, these ribs are really, really good, right? They're really good. And all it's on is salt and pepper, right? And that's why a lot of the real bosses out there, when they really nail their offset smokers, they do salt and pepper, right? They do salt and pepper, maybe a little bit of garlic powder, and they serve it without sauce. Why? So they can rub your nose in the fact that they have amazing technique. Same reason why I love sourdough bread, right? We all start with the same basic ingredients. It's all flour, water, salt. That's it. You all get flour, water, and salt, okay? My sourdough bread is going to come out better than yours. Why? Because of my technique. My technique's legit, all right? I've been practicing for years. Same thing with a smoker, right? Once you get your technique down on an offset, then you're going to have, that great flavor. Now, in that same category of the offset is what we call the pellet poopers. Okay, and those pellet poopers are the auger-driven pellets that you'll see. The most common version is the Traeger, right? But every company kind of has their version. And what it does is you take your wood. It's a compressed wood pellet. And what's nice is these compressed wood pellets have a very specific thermal mass, and so you can basically, the auger will calculate the burn rate at which they should drop the pellets onto the fire to control the temperature, and it's sort of a set it and forget it. It's very, very close to the sous vide of smoking, right? And now a lot of them are app driven, so you fire up your Traeger and you say, hey, I want you to be 225 for 8 hours, and it goes, okay? Now, there is a little bit of a trade-off, like everything. You're trading convenience for the fact that the smoke flavor isn't ever going to be as good as the as the pure offset stick burner. And this is why when you go to a professional barbecue restaurant, right, you see them have these massive offsets where they're burning logs in their fire boxes. I don't really know of anyone who's using a pellet-driven smoker that has attained world acclaim yet. However, no matter how hardcore you are, okay, sometimes you just want to smoke pork butt. Sometimes you just want like a good pulled pork. Sometimes you just want a good brisket. Sometimes you just want a good rack of ribs, right? And the pellet-driven smokers, they can do a really good rack of ribs and a really good brisket and a really good pork roast, right? And they can do it while you're out running errands on a Saturday, okay? You're not there, everyone knows, or not everyone, but a good majority of the audience, Chef Sean, right? He's been my right-hand guy at the Renaissance for a long time now. He's a big barbecue snob, and we love talking barbecue. He got a Yoder offset smoker. Those things are built like tanks. They're beautiful. They're great. It's a beautiful stick burner, and he wakes up at 4 a.m., right, to get his fire going for his brisket when he's having a party at his house. He's actually doing one this Saturday I'm going one over there for the UFC fights, right? And I'm really excited to taste his brisket. I mean, the guy is just a maniac. You know what else he's in the market for? A pellet smoker. You know why? Because sometimes he doesn't want to wake up at 4 a.m. Just because you're a boss at, cooking in an offset doesn't mean you don't enjoy a solid, rack of smoked ribs on your weekend. And again, we're talking that like extra 15 to maybe 20% of perfection. But if you can get it on a pellet smoker, if you can get it 85, 90% of the way there, and you also have the palate of the well-developed palate of a good cook, right, you're going to be able to turn out a great rack of ribs. And and the trade-off is you're not going to be spending all day doing it, okay? So that's your pellet smokers and your offset cookers. Now, the third category is your basic just outdoor gas grills, which again, barbecue snobs, it's kind of like guys we were talking about earlier, where it's like, oh, look at my $500 chef's knife, and it's dull as shit, and they can't even, use their guide hand properly, right? It's that symbolic self-completion. I have a $500 chef knife. Of course I'm a great cook, right? No, you're not. I hate anything that's on gas. I hate gas grills. I hate them. It's coal or bust. It's live fire or bust. Okay, Skippy, just calm down. I mean, don't you ever just want to go outside and those beautiful like early summer or late summer evenings where it's like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, right? And it feels so nice. It's so beautiful outside. And you just want to hang out. You don't want to go inside and cook. But also, too, like maybe you've been mowing the lawn and, trimming the trees, or you just been, playing with the kids all day. And now you're like, shit, I really don't want to go and get my chimney and fill it with coals and fire up the coals and wait for 15 to 20 minutes, make sure they're perfectly ashed over. And I'm going to pour them out. I'm going to put them on one side, and I'm going to, on the slower side, I'm going to reverse sear. And then after it's reverse seared, it's perfect. It's like, hour and a half later, and like the whole ambiance of the evening is destroyed, right? That's where your gas grills are great. The gas grills are consistent. They're hot. They burn clean. You're good to go, right? So there's always a place, at least on my patio, for a good gas grill, right? You fire that sucker up, you leave the lid on, you let it get nice and hot. It's easy to really do 2-zone cooking systems, so you can have a side where you sear your steaks, and you can have a side where you move those steaks over into the cooler area to let them finish. Very, very similar to pan roasting, where you start in a hot pan and you move off to a side, okay? And so what allows you to do is just fire up that grill on a whim, walk outside, you have your steak in hand, maybe you got some baked potatoes rolled up in some foil, you got some corn that's rolled up in foil, that's hanging on your little hanger ledge in the back there with some butter and getting all nice and buttery and tasty and salty, right? And you just cook your steaks, and you're hanging out in your patio, you're eating some nice grilled steaks with baked potato and side salad, and it's a delicious meal, and you're enjoying your summer evening without a whole lot of fuss. Now, one of the issues with gas grills in general is the grates they come with are really bad at maintaining heat and bad at searing, especially your cheaper models. Right now, there are some really awesome high-end gas grills out there that have like searing sides on them that give you a really, really beautiful char. And then you also have, I'm trying to think of, there's one that Sean actually just bought. Yes, if Sean does have a massive barbecue problem. We'd call it an obsession. What's the one that he just bought? Because it looks pretty sweet. He almost talked me into buying it too. It's a really nice. It's the Phantom Prestige P500, and I wish I could share this on my screen, but I just have it on my phone in the text. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. But it's really nice. But so, I mean, the thing is just go ahead and just search for the Phantom Prestige P500, and it's going to set you back about $1,200 to $1,500. Yes, we do take our barbecue seriously, right? And see, I did it, right? Some barbecue, it's grilling. Chill out, right? Chill out. It's all outdoor cooking, okay? Just relax. Yeah, we take our outdoor cooking seriously. But it has a beautiful searing burner on the side, okay? And that's really nice for searing your steaks and doing reverse sears and things of that nature. Now, for people who have a gas-driven grill that's not really great at searing, a lot of that is coming from your heat retention on your grill. So check out the grill grates, right? You've seen them advertised everywhere. They're a good, solid product. You basically measure the interior of your grill. A lot of them, they come spec. You just kind of put in the grill that you have, and they will send you the grill grates for that size. And what's nice is you flip them over. You have a flat surface. You want to do a nice flat sear, like you want to do diner-style hamburgers, right? Or even like bacon or stuff. You can sear on the flat side. And then you flip those grill grates over, and you have the raised edge side, so you get your nice grill marks. Okay, and with that said, another thing to kind of piss off my barbecue people out there. This is a great use for your cast iron pans. Last episode I was talking about how I don't really like cast iron pans because they're kind of finicky, right? The best use for your cast iron pan is when you're reverse searing something. Right? So if I'm reverse searing, say, a really nice thick ribeye, my favorite way to do it is I'll set up the coals on one side, right, using that slow and sear, and I'll dial it in so it's low and slow. I'm holding my ribeye at about 225, 250. I like a little, and it can be anything. You use mesquite, pecan, walnut. I like to use, it depends. My wife doesn't like the mesquite. It's a little bit too harsh for her. For me, I like it sometimes, a little bit of salt and pepper, garlic, right, mesquite. It's going to taste kind of like, you feel like a cowboy, right? It is a little bit of a harsher flavor, but I enjoy it. A lot of times I use pecan or apple, and I bring that ribeye up to right about 130 using the reverse sear method, nice low and slow with some smoke. If it's nice and thick, it takes about an hour and a half. Then I'll pull it off, let it rest, and while it's resting, I take the lid off and I open up the dampener on the bottom and let those coals on the left-hand side really fire up and get hot. Now, you can sear directly on those coals, which is separated by a grate, but the coals are pretty close to the grate. But really, the best way to do it is a cast iron pan. So I'll put the cast iron pan on top of those coals on the hot side, let it get really, really hot. Why? Because yummy meat tastes delicious. Or excuse me, yes, it does. Brown meat tastes delicious, okay? So if you maximize the surface of brown meat, it's always just going to be better. And when you brown stuff on grills, you almost always have certain portions of your steak that are underbrowned. So cast iron raging hot, hard sear on one side, flip it over, hard sear on the other side, throw in some thyme, throw in a couple cloves of crushed garlic, butter base, and now you have that refined approach where you're what they call enroasting, right? Enrobing your steak with that hot brown butter. So it's really going to give you that nice, beautiful, even sear. And assuming you allowed your steak to rest long enough, you're not going to up-temp it. So you're going to get that beautiful butter-basted crust with a little bit infused of thyme and garlic, like we've talked about before, right? A lot of your complex aromatic molecules are only fat soluble, so those are going to dissolve into the fat of the butter. And now you're spooning that aromatic brown butter over the top of your steak, spoon, pulling it off, letting it rest, and you slice. It's a beautiful mid-rare, and it's absolutely delicious. And that is my ultimate favorite way to cook a ribeye outside. Takes a little bit of time, right? It's that reverse sear method, but you finish with the cast iron pan and butter base, and you feed that to somebody, they'll be like, "Whoa, what is this black magic you have up your sleeve?" Like, you know how sometimes we talk about crushing our culinary nemesis, right? That person in your life that thinks they're a good cook, and sometimes you just want to bring them over to your house and demoralize them, like really show them who's boss, right? That's a really good approach. Right, you bring them over, you do the reverse seared ribeye, you get a nice thick, like 3-inch cut ribeye, and you reverse sear it with a little bit of smoke, and then you finish it with a hard sear on your cast iron while butter basting, and oh my goodness gracious, that's gonna be some good eating right there. All right. Just kind of reading through your comments here. Yeah. When I had a gas grill, I used a side burner for deep frying outside more than anything else. Yeah, that's actually nice as well, because you have the, you always get that sort of like greasy fryer smell in your house that takes a couple of days to get out, if ever. So yeah, using the side burner for frying is really great. Susan says she has the Vortex. You can cook on indirect heat. I'm going to click on the comments here, see if I can expand these a little bit more. I'm going to show you guys something real quick here. Just one of my little personal frustrations. Let me see if so you can see right here, right? I can see your comments coming in. I got 70 of them, right? But it's only showing me the first 4 here. And I click on those to try and expand, and it's not allowing me to. Now, in the live module, where we stream to that live event, it has a different interface, so it allows me to see your comments better. But we were having a hard time with that earlier, right? Because the live module just adds another level of complexity. So it sure would be nice if I could just go click on these comments and go through. Oh, yeah. So Dave says I should get myself a drum smoker. Those are awesome, right? The pit barrel cooker, that's been on my hit list for a while. At a certain point though, I spend a lot of money on a lot of kitchen stuff. It's so yeah. So I definitely have my hit list, and the pit barrel cooker is on them. I'm gonna add some more outside cooking devices to my lineup sometime this summer. Let's see. So we got the Vortex for the Komodo cooker, enhance your charcoal cooking experience. Vortex barbecue. That's from Suzanne. So thank you for that. And then we'll get the whole comment thing figured out so I can check your comments live a little bit easier. I do appreciate everybody who's dropping their comments in the live chat, but we'll get that all squared away. We might actually try YouTube next week again because just their live commenting system is better. I think I might have worked out the kinks on that. Okay. So now, you know what? Yeah, I am going to need a bigger patio. So the third topic of the day was how to get paid the maximum wage for your work in a kitchen or in a restaurant in general. But it's a pretty broad topic, and we're almost at an hour mark. So I think I'd like to push that to next week so I can give it the time that and the discussion that it really deserves. So for all of my pros out in the audience, make sure you tune into next week's episode because I will be talking about how you can make more money in the kitchen. You do not have to live that pauper lifestyle. You do not have to live the starving artist lifestyle. Yes, you can make good money in a professional kitchen. Don't let people tell you otherwise, right? But there's, as somebody who has started from the bottom and worked their way to the top and makes a great living in the kitchen, and who also is in charge of hiring, firing, approving or denying raises, right? And hundreds of them at that over the years. There's definitely some do's and don'ts to maximize your earnings. So we will go over that in next episode. That's a bit of a little bit of a teaser for you. If you haven't already, check out the Culinary Bootcamp found online at stellaculinary.com/bootcamp. Sign up for our Facebook group. It's free and it's friendly. It's where we broadcast live and hold our discussions in a forum-like setting. Facebook.com/groups/Stella Culinary. Sign up for our free email newsletter. Yeah, and then also, too, Dave brings up a good point. If you want more information on the barbecue subject, head on over to stellaculinary.com/SCS. That'll get you straight to our podcasting page. And I did a whole series a couple years ago with some barbecue people that I'm a big fan of. But my favorite one, well, it's kind of hard to say, but my favorite one was probably with Meathead. Meathead really killed it on our podcast. So he runs the website, AmazingRibs.com. Super gracious with his time. I could have talked to him for hours, and I kind of got the feeling that he could have talked to me for hours as well. And we need to have him back on the podcast. But so the barbecue series starts with episode 38. Greg Rempe of the Barbecue Central show, which also, if you're really into barbecue, check out that podcast. And then we talk to Meathead in episode 40, AmazingRibs.com, and that's a really, really good one. Then Malcolm Reed of How to Barbecue Right, he's episode 41. And if you haven't checked out Malcolm Reed's YouTube channel, and he's actually the reason why I don't shoot a whole lot of videos on cooking outside, because any idea that I really have for a video, Malcolm's already shot it, and he's done a better job than I would have done. Right? So I just kind of, there's some things I have to add to the conversation from a professional chef's perspective, but when it comes from like a legit barbecue guy, Malcolm Reed is your dude. So go to, just Google search How to Barbecue Right, but that was a killer podcast episode. And then for people who are really more interested in diving deeper in what sort of pieces of equipment they should buy, listen to episode 42. That was with Max Good. So Max Good probably has one of the coolest jobs out there in the culinary field. He works for Meathead of AmazingRibs.com, and his job is basically anytime a company comes out with a new smoker or a cooker or a griller or anything that you cook with outside, he even gets like brick ovens and stuff, they send it to Max for free, and Max cooks on them and reviews them and figures out if he wants to keep them or give them to Meathead or whatever. But this guy has probably cooked on more barbecues than you even know exist. And in his episode, he basically breaks down what the different kind of smokers and cookers that you need. And it's funny. I think when I talk to every single person, I asked them the question: if you could only have one, right? If you could only have one cooker, which one would it be? And every single one except for one, and I forget who it was because it's been a while, said it would be the Weber Smoky Summit, right? The Weber Kettle Smoky Summit, which is basically like the beefed up version of the Weber Kettle that's air gapped and insulated, which was kind of Weber's response to the whole Big Green Egg. And they're expensive. They're about $2,000. And that's kind of on my wish list. I'm a little bit torn right now because I kind of want the convenience of a pellet pooper. Barrel cookers are just so manly, right? So you look super cool when you're cooking things, when you're hanging anything over a live fire, right? So, my manly ego wants, a barrel cooker in my backyard. But I'm going to have to start making some decisions. But like the Weber Smoky Summit, that kettle is pretty badass. So anyways, you got some tough decisions to make. There's some more information online at stellaculinary.com/SCS. Listen to those podcast episodes. Also, I'll drop some links in the show notes. So if you pull this up on your podcast app, if you're listening to it on the app, it'll be links in the show notes. Also, if you're watching this replay on our Stella Culinary Live YouTube channel, found at youtube.com/Stella Culinary Live. If you expand the description underneath the video, I'll put links to these episodes as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I much appreciate it. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend and cooks something delicious. I will see you all next week.